All right, it's time for another 2022 college football team season preview and game-by-game prediction. Up today, the Oklahoma Sooners, currently of the Big 12, of course, soon to be a part of the SEC sometime in the next couple of years, depending on when they're able to get out of the Big 12. Shout out to Not Host, at least I think that's how you pronounce it. If I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. Over on the UNCLELOU Patreon page, he suggested that I do this Oklahoma prediction video, so I hope you enjoy it, sir. I really appreciate you helping to support the channel over on the Patreon page. All these prediction videos that I do come as suggestions from the UNCLELOU Patreon page. So if you're a member over there, make sure you head over to the Patreon page. You'll see my most recent post over there is about the prediction videos, and if you look through the comments, you'll see that everybody is telling me what team they want to do. Make sure if you're a member of the Patreon page that you head over there and comment on that post. Let me know what team you want to do. I'm going to do them throughout the month of July and into August as well, probably at least the first couple of weeks of August leading up to week 0, which I think is on August 27th. If you want to look around the Patreon page, there's a link in the description of this video. You can click that link and it'll take you over there. We do lots of fun stuff over there. Of course, with the season starting here next month, I do a lot of game streams on the Patreon page. In fact, I stream a game every single Saturday during the season over on the Patreon page. So we have a lot of fun over there. It's a great way to help support the channel. Check out the Patreon page. The link is in the description. All right, Oklahoma Sooners. Now, of course, Oklahoma, one of the most talked about teams in the offseason, right, for obvious reasons. Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma at the end of last season. He's the first coach to voluntarily leave Oklahoma for another job since 1973. And that coach, I believe, left to go to the NFL. Lincoln Riley, of course, left, took the job at Southern Cal. And Oklahoma fans, there's no love lost between Oklahoma fans and Lincoln Riley. Oklahoma fans can't stand him. They don't even refer to him as Lincoln Riley anymore. In my comments section, about a month or so after Lincoln Riley left to take the Southern Cal job, I started seeing comments anytime I talked about Oklahoma that were referring to someone they were referring to someone and using the initials TBOW. TBOW. It took me a couple of days to figure out what they were talking about. That's how they refer to Lincoln Riley now. Not every Oklahoma fan, I'm sure, but a lot of them refer to Lincoln Riley now as TBOW. They won't even say his name. What does TBOW stand for? That bitch out west. They're not happy with the way Lincoln Riley handled his departure from Oklahoma. Now, most Oklahoma fans that I talk to don't seem to mind that he's gone. They're very happy with Brent Venables, and we'll talk more about him in a second. It seems to be the way that he handled it. In a lot of Oklahoma fans' minds, Lincoln Riley wanted out of Oklahoma well before he actually decided to take the Southern Cal job, and perhaps even knew he was taking the Southern Cal job as early as the start of last season. How much of that is true and how much of it is just kind of, fans being irritated at what happened, I don't know. But the point is, the fans ain't got no use for Lincoln Riley. And if there's a college football god, somehow we will get a Southern Cal versus Oklahoma bowl game at the end of this season. It would be absolutely unbelievable to see Oklahoma have to play Southern Cal, or rather to see Lincoln Riley and Southern Cal have to play Oklahoma. So I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot of bowl arrangements between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, but so we'll see. But anyway, we are going to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners today, and we'll start with Brent Venables, of course. Was at Oklahoma a long time ago under Bob Stoops. More recently, of course, he's been the defensive coordinator under Dabo Swinney at Clemson for the last, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever it's been. And Clemson has had one of the best defenses in college football during his time there. Of course, they also won a couple of national championships, but almost year in and year out under Brent Venables, Clemson fielded a not good but great defense. He's also a good recruiter. The scheme works. Oklahoma fans are excited to have him. Of course, they were known sort of as an offensive juggernaut under Lincoln Riley, but the defense just got completely neglected. It's not that the defense was bad. It was horrendous under Lincoln Riley almost every single year. 2017, for example, they made the playoffs, played Georgia. It was a great game, probably the best playoff game we've ever seen. That was the overtime game in the Rose Bowl. Oklahoma's defense was absolutely pathetic that year. I believe they were ranked 130th out of 130 teams, and they weren't dead last every single year, but the point is their defense was just absolutely horrendous under Lincoln Riley. So the Oklahoma fans are happy to have a defensive guy in. They consider him an Oklahoma guy, right? And so there's reason to be optimistic, I think, if you're Oklahoma fans, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Now, how much difference can he make in 1 year for his first year? Well, more difference than you could make 5 years ago, right? And that's thanks in large part to the transfer portal, which we'll talk about when we talk about Oklahoma's roster this year. So typically when you bring a new coach in, you're looking at 2, 3, 4 years, right, to kind of overhaul the roster, to sort of flip it around. Not necessarily the case these days with the transfer portal. You can go out and bring guys in, and of course they can play right away. And Brent Venables and the staff at Oklahoma have done a good job this offseason of kind of scouring the transfer portal for some players that fit. And again, we'll talk about some of those players as we get into the roster. But I like Brent Venables. He's obviously one of the best defensive minds in all of college football. My only, I don't know if you want to call it skepticism or whatever, my only question really about Brent Venables is, can he be a head coach? That's the only question. And there is no way to know that, right? We've seen plenty of coordinators, whether you're talking offensive or defensive, get their first head coaching job and have almost immediate success. Well, Kirby Smart at Georgia comes to mind, going to a national title game in his second year, right? We've seen other coordinators who have not had success as a head coach. I do believe it's a different skill set to be the head coach of a college football team than it is to be a defensive coordinator. Obviously, you have a lot more responsibilities as a head coach, and less of those responsibilities are directly tied to on-field coaching, right? It's scheme, philosophy, hiring decisions, recruiting decisions in some cases, managing a team, right? Roster decisions in terms of who starts and different things like that. A lot of different responsibilities come along with being a head coach as opposed to being specifically a position coach or a defensive coordinator. Some coordinators are able to make that transition seamlessly. Others, it takes them a while, and still some others, they just sort of never get it. Will Muschamp comes to mind. I think Will Muschamp's a hell of a defensive mind and a great defensive coordinator or analyst or defensive coach or whatever you want to do with him. Clearly, he's not head coach material, right? And so until we see Lincoln Riley coach the Sooners as head coach, Lincoln Riley, I promise I didn't mean to say that. Don't get mad. Until we see Brent Venables coach a game, a month, a season, a couple of seasons, right? We don't really know how he's going to handle that. So that's my primary question about Oklahoma, specifically when it comes to this season. And then there's the roster, and we have to talk about the roster. They lost 15 starters off of last year's team, either to graduation, NFL draft, or transfer, right? Of course, they lost not just their starting quarterback, Caleb Williams, but also their backup quarterback, Spencer Rattler, who was the starting quarterback at the beginning of the season. So first-string, second-string quarterback transfer out. You lose a couple of wide receivers, right? Mario Williams, Jaden Hazelwood or Hasselwood, however you pronounce it. They lost a lot of players. And that's becoming more and more common in today's football. When a coach leaves, sometimes the players don't want to be there anymore, and we saw that when Lincoln Riley decided to leave. Now, the flip side of that is the new coach comes in. He may lose a few players to the transfer portal, but he then can go out to the transfer portal himself and bring players in. And that's what Brent Venables and staff have done this offseason, like I mentioned earlier. Dylan Gabriel, probably the most notable one, right? You think Oklahoma, you think quarterback. Now, that may change going forward here with Brent Venables being a defensive guy head coach. But, you know, when we've thought about Oklahoma over the last few years, we've thought about Heisman winners and 5,000-yard seasons and first-round NFL draft picks for good reason, right? You bring Dylan Gabriel in. We'll see how he does. He did pretty good at Central Florida. Now, the competition at Central Florida, not what it is in the Power 5 or the Big 12, but still. In 2 seasons at Central Florida, Dylan Gabriel threw for about 8,000 yards. That's pretty good, about 4,000 yards a season. And I think he had about 60 touchdowns, 70 touchdowns, something like that. So he put up good numbers at Central Florida. There's no reason to think that he won't be a good college quarterback even at the Power 5 level. Is he Caleb Williams? No, I don't think he is. I don't even think he's Spencer Rattler. But that's not necessarily a bad thing or a bad sign for Oklahoma, right? Brent Venables is going to take on a little bit of a different philosophy and kind of overall scheme at Oklahoma, obviously, than what Lincoln Riley did. Now, with offensive coordinator, he brings in Jeff Lebby, who, interestingly enough, worked with Dylan Gabriel for 1 year at Central Florida He spent the last couple of years now at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin, and he wants to run an up-tempo offense. You know, you get tackled, you jump up, you run right back to the line of scrimmage, you snap the ball again. There are different forms of up-tempo offenses going around in college football right now. You've got the Tennessee, which is, 200 miles an hour. Yeah, it's literally as fast as you can possibly do it. You've got other hurry-up offenses that are just packages or periods of time where they choose to run that. We'll see what Jeff Lebby does with Dylan Gabriel in that Oklahoma offense. But at wide receiver, we have to talk about wide receiver. You lose Mario Williams and Jaden Hazelwood, like I said. Now, there is some good news. You get, I forget the guy's first name now. His last name is Wease, W-E-A-S-E, 5-star out of high school, played really good a couple of years ago, had almost 40 catches, I believe, was injured all of last year, didn't play. I think he played a little bit in week 1. He played a little bit in one game, I think that was it. He's back and says he's 100% healthy and ready to go. That's good news because the bad news, like I said, Mario Williams gone. And Jaden Hazelwood gone. You got Mims back, too. He didn't catch a ton of balls last year, but he's a big play guy. He averaged over 20 yards per catch last year. So, you get Mims on one side. If Wease is ready to go on the other side, you got 5 other returning receivers from last year on the team. Those 5 receivers, though, combined for only 29 catches last year. So they're going to have to play a bigger role this year. Running back, I think Oklahoma could struggle this year at the running back position. You return 3 starters on the offensive line, but the offensive line was horrible last year. I think you gave up 33 sacks. You get 3 starters back. Hopefully, they'll play better this year than they did last year, and you have a couple of spots to fill in. You brought in a transfer at one of the spots. And at running back, Tennessee throwaway Eric Gray. He's okay. He's not great. I definitely don't think he's as good as some of the backs Oklahoma has had over the last 4, 5, 6 years. He's definitely no Adrian Peterson, but who is? But I don't even think he's as good as the running backs Oklahoma's had over the last few years. Now, they do have a freshman they're bringing in that could be really, really good. And, look, as a running back, if you're good, you're good. You could play as a freshman. Maybe you don't play on a lot of third downs because maybe you're not all the way ready for the blocking assignments and the blitz pickups and the reads and the things like that. But if a running back can run a sweep, he can run a sweep. So I think you're going to see that freshman play. They'll rotate 2 or 3 running backs. Almost every team in America is doing that now. But Eric Gray is the primary returning running back there. And I'm just, I'm not a huge fan. I don't think he's great. Like I said, I don't think he's as good as the running backs Oklahoma is used to having in years past. You look over on the defensive side of the ball. Now you got White back at linebacker, probably the captain of the defense. He was really good last year, and they got 60-something tackles. So you get him back. Again, you're bringing in transfers on the defense as well, all 3 levels. You're probably going to have, my guess would be, you're going to have a transfer starting at all 3 levels of the defense, somewhere on the defensive line, linebacker, and also back in the secondary. Now, I do think Oklahoma's defense is going to be improved immediately this year versus what it was almost any other year under Lincoln Riley. Sorry about that. I talk too damn much. Where were we? Good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, I do think Oklahoma's defense will be better. Literally the moment Brent Venables stepped on campus, I think the defense got better. Now, the problem is how much better, right? And how much time. Well, let's start here because I think we can agree on this even if I know you're an Oklahoma fan, most likely if you're watching this video, and I'm obviously not. I'm not biased against Oklahoma, but I'm always going to get the comments that say, well, if I say anything negative at all about, in this case, Oklahoma, but it happens in every video, then you're going to get the comment to go, well, this guy just hates Oklahoma. Why would I hate Oklahoma? I've got no reason to hate Oklahoma. In fact, I rarely think about them, to be honest. The only time I think about Oklahoma is when the wagon tips over, because that is funny. That is funny. As long as no one gets hurt. If someone gets hurt, it's not funny. What were we talking about? Oh, the defense. Can we agree? Can we start here? Can we start here with some agreement, Oklahoma man? Yes, you've got Brent Venables, Clemson's defensive coordinator. Okay, and hell, he brought what's his name? Shoot, I'm drawing a blank on his name now. Teb. Anyway, he brought him with him from Clemson. He's now your defensive coordinator. That's true. Can we agree on this, though? Your defense is not going to be as good as Clemson's just because you have Brent Venables this year. It's not going to happen. Clemson's defense is as good as it is, and Clemson's going to have an amazing defense this year. They got the best defensive line in all of college football. They're going to have a top 5 defense overall, period. Yes, a lot of that, almost all of it, could be credited to Brent Venables. It didn't get that way overnight. That happened under 7, 8 recruiting classes in a row where the Clemson staff made an effort, targeted talented defensive guys, right? This is the problem with Oklahoma. You go back and you look at their recruiting classes. Yes, they're great recruiting classes. Top 10 every single year, top 5 some years, right? Look at the top 10 recruits Oklahoma signed in any given year under Lincoln Riley. 7, 8, 9 of them are going to be offensive players. They did not prioritize defensive talent under Lincoln Riley. As good as Brent Venables is, he can't take the talent that is Oklahoma's defense this year and make it Clemson's defense. It's not going to happen. So is the defense going to get better? Yes, the defense is going to get better. Clearly, Oklahoma's defense is going to get better. It's not going to be a top 5 defense nationally. It's not going to happen. I mean, these steps are going to happen incrementally, right? It's not like Oklahoma had the 30th best defense in America for 4 or 5 years under Lincoln Riley. No, they had the 89th, the 101st, the 130th. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. So maybe this year Oklahoma has a top 40 defense. I mean, that would be huge improvement, right? Then through the transfer portal and recruiting, you go out and you prioritize and you target positions of need. You're moving into the SEC. You better start recruiting defensive linemen and linebackers and corners. And Brent Venables knows this. Trust me, Brent Venables, even though he was in the ACC, he knows what it takes to beat elite teams. We've seen him do it. We've seen him beat Alabama multiple times. So, is Oklahoma's offense going to be as good this year as it was in a normal year under Lincoln Riley? No. Is the defense going to be as bad this year as it was in a normal year under Lincoln Riley? No. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. And that gets us to the hard part, trying to figure out where that middle is. Here's Oklahoma's schedule. Now, outside of the Nebraska game, the non-con schedule should allow Oklahoma to open up the season with 2 pretty easy wins against UTEP and Kent State. Now, in a year where you have a brand new coaching staff, brand new quarterback, a lot of new parts and pieces through the transfer portal, this is the kind of year you want to start off, in my opinion, with a couple of games like this. I know as fans, typically we hate these games because they're just not very interesting. Oklahoma versus UTEP, not very interesting. Oklahoma versus Kent State, not very interesting. But as an Oklahoma fan, I think you have to, count your blessings kind of deal this year that you do start off with a couple of these types of games, right? Let Brent Venables get his feet wet with UTEP and Kent State before you got to go on the road and play Nebraska. So I think you're going to start out here with 2, I don't know if easy is the right word. Maybe it is the right word, but I think you're going to start off 2-0 with little to no problem at all. That's good news. Now, the bad news is I also don't think you're going to be able to tell after these first 2 games exactly how good or not good Oklahoma is, right? If you hold UTEP to 13 points, is that good? Yeah, that's good. Does it mean Oklahoma's defense is amazing? Probably not, because it's UTEP, right? And you can say the same thing for Kent State. But still, Brent Venables, never been head coach before, right? So you get 2 sort of stepping stones here, get his feet underneath him, and then hopefully, offensively and defensively, and from a coaching perspective, hopefully, if you're an Oklahoma fan, Oklahoma will be off and running heading into this Week 3 game on the road at Nebraska, which I do think is going to be a tough game. They almost beat you last year. It was a 1-possession game. I know Nebraska was 3-9. No one's made more jokes about that than I have, and part of that is, Ohio State people running around, crowning Nebraska as the greatest 3-win team in history just because they barely beat them. But that was more of a running joke than anything else. It is true that I think 8 of the 9 losses Nebraska had last year were by 1 possession, and the only loss they had that wasn't 1 possession was to Ohio State, which they lost by 9. If they turn even half of those games around this year, then they're going to go from 3 wins to 6, 7, or 8 wins, right? And I happen to think they're probably going to do a little bit better than that. Addition by subtraction at Nebraska, in my opinion, by getting rid of Adrian Martinez. He transferred out, and they brought Casey Thompson in from Texas. This will be somebody Oklahoma fans are familiar with. They get to face a Texas quarterback on the road at Nebraska. A make-or-break year for Scott Frost here. What does Scott Frost have to do to keep his job? 7, 8 wins, I think he'll be safe, and I think they'll get to 7 or 8 wins. this is going to be a good game. I don't think either team wins this game by 10 points or more. I think this is going to be a really competitive game, a close game that probably comes down to the end. And I'm going to be honest, the game's on the road at Nebraska. I think Nebraska wins. I think Oklahoma takes their first loss of the season, a non-con loss on the road at Nebraska. Now, this won't have anything to do with the Big 12, your standings in the Big 12, or your ability or potential to possibly make the Big 12 title game. And, Oklahoma's what, a 3-point favorite in this game right now? The line is less than a touchdown in this game. It truly is one of those could go either way type of situations, I think. I do think Nebraska is going to have a breakout year this year. They're not going 12-0 and winning and beating Ohio State in a Big Ten title game or anything like that. But I fully expect Nebraska to be one of the most improved teams in America this year, at least from a record standpoint. 3-9 last year. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they completely flipped that around and ended up 9-3 or something like that. Beating Oklahoma would be a huge step towards getting there. I know Oklahoma fans are going to disagree with this pick, and it's not even going to bother me that you disagree. This is going to be a good, close game, and honestly, if somebody wants to tell me Oklahoma's going to win, I'm not going to argue with you. Oklahoma could 100% win this game. One of the hard things about doing these types of prediction videos, it's one thing to look at a schedule, know a little bit about a team, and go, they're probably going to go 10-2. That's one thing. Pinpointing where the two losses then would come, that's another. Or same thing, 8-4, 7-5, whatever the case. That's a lot easier than actually trying to pinpoint the losses. So, call me an idiot. Do whatever you think you need to do. I think Oklahoma takes their first loss of the season, week 3, on the road at a much improved Nebraska team. And Scott Frost gets definitely the biggest win of his time so far at Nebraska. Now, the Big 12, of course, right now has 10 teams in it. They play 9 conference the and 3 non-con games. So the 3 non-con games you get over and out of the way week 1, 2, and 3. Week 4, you start your conference schedule at home against Kansas State. I think you get a win there. I still like that coaching staff at Kansas State. I liked them a lot when Kansas State made the hire. I thought it was a really good hire. They've been kind of middling around. There hasn't really been, there hasn't been a 2-10 season where the wheels just came off. But where's the 10-2 season, the 9-3 season? I kind of thought Kansas State would be a little bit better off this far into Chris Kleiman's tenure there than they are. I can't see Oklahoma losing this game at home to Kansas State. I think you win this one. You're 1-0 now in conference play. First conference road game of the year comes on the road at TCU, another team with a new coaching staff. They also lost one of their best players to the transfer portal, running back Zach Evans, transferred out to Ole Miss. Again, I just think Oklahoma is too talented to lose this game. I do think Brent Venables might take some bumps along the way in his first year, but there's enough talent at Oklahoma to where I think they're going to still win the majority of their games, this being one of them on the road at TCU. And then, of course, the biggest game of the year, every single year, not just for Oklahoma, but in all of the Big 12, the Red River Shootout. And yes, I still call it that. The Red River Shootout, in my top 3 probably, of all-time favorite college football rivalries, I'd have, in no particular order, the Iron Bowl with Alabama and Auburn, Michigan and Ohio State, and Texas and Oklahoma, to me, are 3 of probably the best rivalries in all of college football. I love this game. I watch it every single year. I don't think there's anything that can happen in this game that's going to top what we saw last year. Off the top of my head, or at least what I can remember, by far the greatest Texas-Oklahoma game I have ever seen. Just an unbelievable game that went Oklahoma's way at the end. Oklahoma has dominated this series lately. Texas has been changing head coaches every 3 years, like their life depends on it. They got Sarkisian in there now, a complete disappointment last year, and it really started with this game, right? Texas played okay early in the season. They lost this Oklahoma game, and it's like everyone gave up after that. They ended up only winning 6 or 7 games or whatever it was, lost to Kansas, blew 5 or 6 halftime leads in the second half of the season. It was just a disaster. Sarkisian's got to do better this year, or he's going to find himself on the hot seat next year. And Texas, you do not want to be in a situation where you're changing head coaches the year you're heading into the SEC, in my opinion. You need to have some stability. If for no other reason, than scheme and philosophy. Texas and Oklahoma need to be preparing now for life in the SEC. Football is different in different conferences, right? I've had this conversation with Oklahoma fans in an agreeable way when we're talking about defensive ratings at the end of a year, and the Big 12's defenses seemed to have, be lower rated than the SEC's defense, and the Big 12 man would tell me, well, that's because in the Big 12, we spread it out, we throw it around, we score more, we do this, so it affects the defense. So there's truth to that, right? So there's different styles of football in different conferences. And when you're changing head coaches every 2 or 3 years, it's hard to sort of have a plan and stick to that plan, right? Texas needs to have a good year. Sarkisian needs to have a good year. Quinn Ewers, I guess, is going to be the quarterback there. They have who I think is the best running back in America, and Bijan Robinson. Their issues mostly last year were on defense. Is this going to be another one of those games where nobody wants to make a tackle like we saw last year? 2 really bad defenses? I don't know. But I'm almost afraid to even click this button. I think Texas wins this game. Now, part of this is just that, they've at least their coaching staff is intact. I think they've got the best player in this game on either side of the ball on either team in Bijan Robinson. Now, obviously, for Texas to win this game, Quinn Ewers is going to have to be good. And we don't know that. I'll admit, I have the same questions about Quinn Ewers and doubts and everything else that I'm sure as an Oklahoma fan you have too. I've never seen the guy do anything in college other than cash $1 million check at Ohio State and then run out the back door, which was hilarious to me, by the way. That guy, Ohio State got what they deserved. They gave the guy $1 million for nothing his junior year in high school. He then skipped his senior year of high school, enrolled at Ohio State, cashed his $1 million check, sat on the bench for 4 months, and then got the hell out of Dodge and went to Texas, where he probably got another NIL deal down there. So Quinn Ewers might be the richest person in college football. Probably already has two separate $1 million NIL deals. But anyway, whoever wins this game is going to be the team that learns how to play defense by week 5 or 6 of the season, right? Because last year, neither one of these teams knew what they were doing defensively. Need massive improvement defensively for both of these teams. Whichever team gets it probably wins this game. I'm picking Texas for, I really don't have a reason. The coaching staff is intact. And look, I know Oklahoma has dominated Texas over the last decade or however long you want to look at in this rivalry. It just kind of seems like Texas is due to win one, and they almost did last year. I think they find a way to pull it out this year and win this game. That's your second loss, but only your first loss within the Big 12. Then you play Kansas, and the good news is you're not Texas, so you don't lose to Kansas. Hey, we can agree on this too, right, Oklahoma? Horns down. Yeah, you'll beat Kansas. I'm not going to spend any more time talking about that. What would be the point? Then you go on the road and play Iowa State. This has been an Achilles heel for Oklahoma over the last 5 or 6 years. They've lost a couple of times there, just off the top of my head in recent memory. I don't think it'll happen this year. I don't know what's going on with Iowa State. Matt Campbell was the hottest name in coaching a couple of years ago. Iowa State started the season last year ranked in the top 10, and then all they did for 12 or 13 weeks in a row during the season was take a dump on the field. It was just absolutely horrible. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were last year, but they're not beating you. I think you beat Iowa State, even though it's on the road and you have had a hard time there. I think you get the win. Now the Baylor game. Now, I've done this video already for Baylor, so if you've seen that one, you know where I'm headed here. Here's the thing when I do these prediction videos. People always will tell me, how in the hell do you have whatever team losing to this team but beating that team? Well, it happens all the time, lady. You don't always lose to the teams that are better than you and beat the teams that are worse than you. That's why we have upsets. That's one of the reasons we love college football. There's upsets all the time. All the time. Is Baylor better than Nebraska? Yes, I think they are. But guess what? I think you beat Baylor. Yes, I think you beat Baylor. Only because this game is at home. That's it. I think if this game was at Baylor, I would have picked Baylor. So, I think Baylor is better than Nebraska and probably better than Texas. But you don't just automatically beat the teams that you're better than and automatically lose to the teams that are better than you. There are upsets across the from coast to coast in college football every single week of the season. Again, that's what makes doing this type of video so difficult. It's not just looking at this schedule and going, well, Oklahoma looks like an 8-4 team. All right, have a great day. Thanks for watching. trying to pinpoint where the 2, 3, 4 losses, whatever it is, are going to come, that's the hard part. Because you can't just, these videos would be boring, pointless, and there'd be no reason to make them if all I did is go, well, Oklahoma's going to be favored in 10 games, and they're going to be an underdog in 2 games. So they're going 10-2. Have a great day. I mean, it just would be a pointless video. I don't expect people to agree with every decision I make on these games when I do these videos, but I at least do my best to offer an explanation about why. I think Oklahoma beats Baylor. There, I said it out loud on video for the whole world to see. At West Virginia, a disaster program right now. Losing Holgerson was not good. This guy they brought in, he just doesn't know what he's doing. Neil Brown, he's terrible. The guy hasn't won more than 6 or 7 games since he's been there. I don't see that changing this year, to be honest. Big 12 Media Days was last week. West Virginia got picked to finish 8th out of 10 teams in the Big 12. I know they brought JT Daniels in, and look, I'm a JT Daniels fan. I think the guy's really, really good. But you got to have somebody to throw the ball to. You got to have an offensive line to block for you. You got to have a defense that can cover receivers and make tackles. West Virginia doesn't have enough of any of that. They're just not very good. They haven't beaten Oklahoma a single time since they joined the Big 12, and they're not doing it this year either. Now, it is on the road. And here's the thing. You're looking for a trap game when you look at schedules, right? This is a prototypical trap game right here. 2 of your biggest games of the year. I know Texas is the rivalry and the game in the Big 12. But honestly, when you're talking about possibly playing for a Big 12 title this year or winning the Big 12 or whatever, look at where this Baylor game and this Oklahoma State game is. Now, those were the 2 teams that played for the Big 12 title last year. You have West Virginia on the road sandwiched in between there. That's the prototypical definition of a trap game. 2 big games in a 3-week period, and then trapped in the middle is a nothing game. And sorry to West Virginia, but in terms of the Big 12, at least this year, Oklahoma at West Virginia is a nothing game. The games that matter are that Baylor game and that Oklahoma State game. So that is a trap game. Now, that being said, I don't think Oklahoma loses. I think you go to Morgantown and get the win, but that is one I think Oklahoma fans should kind of keep their eye on. And then you have the Bedlam game, Oklahoma State. Look, this is a tough stretch of games here after the bye week for Oklahoma. I know people like to say nobody ever plays anybody. Everybody's terrible. Who has this team played? Who has that team played? Oh, such and such is 4-0, but they ain't played nobody. This is a difficult stretch of games coming out of the bye week. On the road at Iowa State, probably the toughest place to play in the Big 12. Home against Baylor. Played for the Big 12 title last year, picked to win the Big 12 by the Big 12 media this year. On the road at West Virginia, longest distance you have to travel for Oklahoma to play a road game. Back home against Oklahoma State, an in-state rival, the Bedlam game, right? And then Texas Tech to close things out as a nothing game. But that Iowa State, Baylor, West Virginia, and Oklahoma, that's a tough stretch of 4 games there. I don't see any way. Wait, no, hold on. I have you losing at Iowa State? Uh-oh. That's a mistake. I just realized that. Let me fix it. I'll fix it. I can't believe I did that. Y'all probably thought I was trolling you. Of course, I don't troll. I'm going to fix that. I'm sorry. I honestly don't know how that happened. Y'all probably been yelling at your phone and banging on the keyboard for the last 5 minutes. No, I think you beat. I think you went on the road at Iowa State. You come back home. Let's get back to this Oklahoma State game. We're getting off track. Now that's the good news. You beat Iowa State. Bad news. I'm sorry. I think you lose to Oklahoma State. Here's the thing. I think you lose to either Baylor or Oklahoma State. It was hard for me to sort of decide on one or the other. It probably makes more sense to think that you would lose to Baylor as opposed to Oklahoma State. But again, the results of these games don't always make sense. I mean, this is one of the reasons we love college football. But so anyway, I completely screwed that up with Iowa State. I apologize. I wasn't trying to troll or anything else. I just literally got the color wrong. I think you finished out the season with a win on the road at a terrible Texas Tech team. They might be the worst team in the Big 12, not named Kansas. I'm just not a believer in Texas Tech. Now, I do like that coaching staff, especially the head coach, and I wouldn't be surprised if their recruiting takes a big step forward over the next couple of years, but that doesn't mean anything really for this season. They just don't have the talent to compete. I think Oklahoma wins. And you're 9-3 And this is the key, though, only 2 losses in the Big 12. Only 2 losses in the Big 12. Very good chance if this happens, you'll wind up playing for the Big 12 title. Of course, it would depend what Texas and Baylor and Oklahoma State do, but I think your Big 12 title game is going to come down to 2 of those 4 teams: Texas, Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State. So anyway, there you go. That's my official prediction for the Oklahoma Sooners for 2022, 9-3. I could see 8-4. I could see 10-2. Well, I'll be honest. I don't really see much beyond 10-2. I just think, Brent Venables, learning curve, never been a head coach. A lot of turnover. Here's the thing about the transfer portal. Yes, you can bring in 10, 15, 20 different puzzle pieces, right? And maybe every one of those pieces is a great player. But do they fit together, right? Can they learn? Brent Venables has a very complex defensive scheme. Very complex. How quickly can that defense pick that up, right? How quickly does Dillon Gabriel fit in with the pieces that were already at Oklahoma? And then you throw in the other transfers as well. How quickly can that come together? Not quickly enough for a 12-0 or an 11-1 type season. I don't see Oklahoma making the playoffs this year. I think the best they could do would be maybe winning the Big 12 title game with a couple of losses, and then a New Year's Six game, which would be great under a first-year head coach, right? Now, Oklahoma made a bunch of playoffs in a row, and it kind of, so they kind of got spoiled, and I get that. But if you bring in a new coach and you end up in a New Year's Six game, I think you had a pretty good season. Feel free to let me know down below where you think I got it wrong. Which games do you think Oklahoma loses? If they're different than the ones that I have here, let me know, and I will talk to you all again real soon. Have a good morning.